Compreendi completamente sua proposta. Vou criar uma história realista e envolvente sobre William, focada em sua jornada de superação e transformação. A narrativa será ambientada nos Kiowa. Seguirá o título William was shunned for his weight. Now he speaks at schools across America. E respeitará a sinopse fornecida. Cada capítulo terá aproximadamente 1.100 palavras, totalizando uma história completa em 4 capítulos. Aqui está. William was shunned for his weight. Now he speaks at schools across America. Capítulo 1. The smell of freshly baked cookies wafted through the modest kitchen of the Mitchell family home in Riverdale, Ohio. It was 1992, and 10-year-old William Mitchell sat at the kitchen table, his round face illuminated by the afternoon sun streaming through the curtains. His mother, Martha, hummed softly as she placed a plate of chocolate chip cookies in front of him. William's eyes lit up, but the joy was fleeting. Tomorrow was the first day of 5th grade, and his stomach churned at the thought. "Mom," William said, his voice barely audible over the radio playing Boys II Men in the background. "Do I have to go to school tomorrow?" Martha turned, wiping her hands on her apron. The lines around her eyes deepened. "What's wrong, sweetie? I thought you were excited about Mrs. Peterson's class." William stared at the cookies, suddenly not hungry. "Tommy Watson said I'm too fat to play kickball. He said nobody wants me on their team because I can't run." Martha's face fell as she sat beside her son, placing her hand over his. "William, honey, don't you listen to Tommy Watson. You are perfect just the way you are." But William knew different. He'd seen the looks, heard the whispers. At 140 pounds, he was the heaviest kid in his grade. The husky clothes his mother bought him from Sears never quite fit right, and he'd learned to dread physical education class, where choosing teams always meant the same thing: William chosen last. The next day confirmed his fears. As he walked into the classroom wearing new jeans and a button-up shirt his mother had ironed the night before, he heard Tommy's voice cut through the morning chatter. "Look who waddled in! Did you break your bed this summer, Whalime?" Laughter erupted. William's face burned as he made his way to his desk, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor. Mrs. Peterson hadn't arrived yet, and the classroom was a lawless territory. "Hey, Mitchell," called Jessica Finley, her ponytail bouncing as she turned in her seat. "My mum says people like you just need willpower. Don't you have any willpower?" More laughter. William slid into his desk, the plastic seat digging into his thighs. He opened his notebook and began doodling, creating an elaborate spaceship where he could escape, far from Tommy Watson and Jessica Finley and everyone else who made him feel like he didn't deserve space in this world. "That's a cool spaceship," came a voice beside him. William looked up to see Michael Chen, the new kid who had moved from California over the summer. Michael's almond-shaped eyes were kind, without a trace of mockery. "Thanks," William mumbled, surprised. "I like sci-fi too," Michael continued. "Have you read Ender's Game?" Before William could answer, Mrs. Peterson walked in, calling the class to order. But something had shifted. For the first time in years, someone had noticed something about William that wasn't his size. The friendship with Michael became William's lifeline that year. Michael didn't seem to care that William couldn't run fast, or that he breathed heavily, climbing the stairs to the library, where they spent lunch breaks discussing books and drawing spaceships. But one friend couldn't shield him from the world. In the school cafeteria, William learned to eat quickly and discreetly, aware of the eyes judging every bite. At home, he found comfort in food. His grandmother's mac and cheese, his father's Sunday pancakes, the cookies his mother baked when he seemed sad. Food didn't judge. Food was consistent comfort. By middle school, William had developed a protective shell. He became the funny kid, making jokes about his weight before others could. "I'm not fat," he'd say with a practiced grin. "I'm just easier to see." The laughter that followed hurt less when he controlled it. His father, Robert, a construction foreman with calloused hands and few words, tried in his way. "You've got to toughen up, son," he'd say, after William came home with a torn backpack where someone had scrawled, "Lard ass," in permanent marker. The world isn't kind to those who are different. In 8th grade, the school implemented a new fitness program. Students were weighed publicly, their BMIs calculated and announced. When William's turn came, the gym teacher, Mr. Barton, frowned at the scale. 234 pounds, Mitchell, that puts you in the severely obese category. The words echoed in the gymnasium, and William felt 30 pairs of eyes burning into him. That night, William locked himself in his room and sobbed into his pillow. His mother knocked gently, but he couldn't face her. How could she understand what it felt like to be the physical embodiment of failure in everyone's eyes? High school brought new torments. William grew taller, reaching 6 feet by sophomore year, but his weight continued to climb. Dating seemed an impossible dream. At the junior prom, he volunteered to man the refreshment table, watching from a distance as classmates slow danced under dimmed lights. Lisa Schultz, a quiet girl from his English class, approached the table. "Not dancing?" she asked, reaching for a cup of punch. William shrugged. "Not really my thing." "Mine either," she admitted. "Too much pressure." They talked for 20 minutes about their shared love of mystery novels. William felt a flutter of hope, but on Monday he overheard Lisa's friends teasing her. "Seriously, Lisa? Fat William? Were you that desperate?" The words settled like stones in his stomach. By graduation, William had mastered invisibility, a remarkable feat for someone his size. He'd learned that attention meant pain, so he sought none. He graduated in the middle of his class, unremarkable in every way except his appearance. At Ohio State University, William found a measure of anonymity in the sea of students. He chose communications as his major, drawn to the power of words after years of feeling silenced. College offered a fresh start, but old habits persisted. He scheduled classes to avoid walking too far across campus, chose seats on the end of rows where he wouldn't have to squeeze past others, and still ate alone most days. Professor Eleanor Jenkins changed everything. In Public Speaking 101, she assigned personal narrative speeches. William prepared a safe topic about his summer job at the local library. But when his turn came, standing before 30 classmates, something unexpected happened. "My name is William Mitchell," he began, his prepared notes trembling in his hands. "And today I want to talk about—" He paused, looking at the expectant faces. For once, they were all listening, waiting for his words. Something shifted inside him. "Actually, I want to talk about what it's like to grow up as the fat kid." The words tumbled out, raw, honest, unplanned. He spoke about the playground taunts, the gym class humiliations, the constant awareness of taking up too much space in a world that wanted him smaller. When he finished, the silence was deafening. Then Professor Jenkins stood, her eyes bright. "That, Mr. Mitchell, is what authentic communication looks like." William didn't know it then, but he had just found his voice. Capítulo 2. The years after college passed in a blur of cubicles and computer screens. William took a job at a marketing firm in Columbus, where his creativity and writing skills were valued, but he remained the office outsider. At 27, weighing 315 pounds, he had settled into a quiet existence. His apartment was a sanctuary, filled with books and the absence of judgment. On weekends, he visited his parents, now empty nesters, who worried about their son's solitude. "Have you thought about those support groups I mentioned?" his mother asked one Sunday, refilling his coffee cup. "The doctor said they can really help." William sighed. "Mom, I've tried everything. The diets, the gym memberships. Nothing sticks." His father looked up from his newspaper. "Your cousin Jeff lost 40 pounds on that new program. The one with the shakes." William nodded, having heard this before. What his parents couldn't understand was that it wasn't just about the weight anymore. It was about the person he'd become because of it, cautious, withdrawn, always anticipating rejection before it could surprise him. At work, William excelled at writing copy that never mentioned his name. He crafted words that sold products and ideas, while he himself remained carefully packaged away from public view. Until Diane Lopez arrived as the new creative director. Diane was a hurricane in human form, loud, demanding, and refreshingly direct. During her first week, she called William into her office. "Your writing is brilliant," she said, gesturing to his latest campaign draft. "But you're wasting your talent on toothpaste and laundry detergent." William shifted uncomfortably in the chair that was slightly too small for him. "It's steady work." Diane leaned forward. "The community center where I volunteer needs someone to lead a workshop on professional communication for at-risk teens. They can't pay much, but it would make a difference. I think you'd be perfect." William's immediate instinct was to refuse. Standing in front of teenagers, the cruelest demographic he'd encountered, seemed like volunteering for torture. But something in Diane's confidence made refusal difficult. "I don't know if I'm the right person," he hedged. "Those kids don't need perfect," Diane said. "They need real. And you, William Mitchell, are perhaps the most genuine person in this office." The workshop was scheduled for a Thursday evening. William spent weeks preparing, creating handouts and presentations, focusing on the content to avoid thinking about the delivery. When the day arrived, he stood outside the community center, sweat dampening his shirt despite the cool October air. Inside, 12 teenagers lounged in metal chairs, their body language broadcasting disinterest. William set up his materials with shaking hands, acutely aware of the whispers and glances. "So, today we're going to talk about communication in professional settings," he began, his voice barely carrying to the back of the room. A girl with purple hair and multiple piercings raised her hand. "No offense, but why should we listen to you?" The room went quiet. It was the question William had been asking himself since he agreed to this madness. In that moment, he made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He chose honesty. "Because I know what it's like when nobody listens to you," he said. "I know what it's like to be judged before you open your mouth." He told them about growing up as the fat kid, about learning to disappear despite his size, about finding power in words when actions seemed limited by his body. As he spoke, the teenagers' postures changed. They leaned forward, they nodded, they recognized parts of themselves in his story. By the end of the 2-hour workshop, they were engaged, asking questions not just about resumes and interviews, but about how to make people see beyond their appearances, their neighborhoods, their circumstances. "That was amazing," Diane said afterward, helping him gather his materials. "You connected with them in a way I haven't seen before." William drove home in a daze. For the first time, he had used his greatest vulnerability as a strength. The feeling was intoxicating. Over the next 6 months, William volunteered at the community center regularly. He developed a workshop series specifically addressing confidence and self-presentation for teens who felt marginalized. Word spread, and other community organizations began to call. The turning point came when Riverside High School, his alma mater, invited him to speak at an assembly about bullying. Walking back into that gymnasium, now as an invited speaker rather than a tormented student, William felt a surreal sense of closure. Standing at the podium, facing hundreds of students not unlike those who had once made his life miserable, William took a deep breath. "My name is William Mitchell, and I graduated from this school 12 years ago. Many of you are sitting where I once sat, feeling what I once felt. Some of you are sitting where the kids who bullied me sat, maybe doing to others what was done to me." The auditorium was silent. Hundreds of eyes fixed on him. "Today I want to talk about the space we take up in the world, not just physical space, but emotional and intellectual space. I want to talk about who gets to be visible and who gets pushed to the margins." For 40 minutes, William spoke without notes, his voice growing stronger with each word. He talked about the casual cruelty of adolescence, the lasting impact of throwaway comments, and the strength it takes to remain compassionate in a world that often rewards meanness. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. Afterward, a line of students waited to speak with him. Among them was a heavy-set boy with eyes that reminded William painfully of his younger self. "Does it ever get better?" the boy asked quietly when his turn came. William considered the question seriously. "It gets different," he said finally, "and you get stronger. The world doesn't always change, but how you carry yourself through it can." That night, William couldn't sleep. The day had awakened something dormant inside him, a purpose, a calling. His phone rang at midnight. It was Diane. "I just got an email from the principal at Riverside," she said without preamble. "They want to know if you're available to speak at the county teachers' conference next month. William, I think you've found your true audience." In the darkness of his bedroom, William smiled. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen, not despite his size, but somehow because of it, because of the perspective it had given him and the empathy it had forced him to develop. The next morning he gave notice at the marketing firm. It was terrifying, leaving a steady paycheck for the uncertain path of public speaking. But it also felt inevitable, as if his entire life had been preparing him for this leap. William Mitchell, who had spent most of his life trying to be invisible, was about to become deliberately, intentionally visible in a way he had never imagined possible. Capítulo 3. The spring of 2015 found William in a Hampton Inn in Dubuque, Iowa, preparing for his 100th school presentation. At 32, he had established a modest reputation in educational circles as the speaker who could reach the unreachable students, the outsiders, the bullied, and sometimes, most surprisingly, the bullies themselves. William adjusted his tie in the mirror, studying his reflection. 3 years of constant travel had changed him in subtle ways. He stood straighter now, meeting his own gaze with a confidence that had once seemed impossible. His weight remained substantial, 295 pounds after some modest success with the nutritionist he could finally afford, but it no longer defined the boundaries of his existence. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Winters, the guidance counselor who had arranged today's visit to Lincoln Middle School. "Auditorium packed. Bring tissues. These kids need you." William had learned that every school had its own pain, its own hierarchies, its own wounds. In rural Iowa, as in suburban Ohio and inner-city Chicago, children found ways to hurt each other with breathtaking precision. His mission wasn't to stop this entirely. He wasn't naive enough to believe that was possible, but to interrupt the cycle long enough for some to escape it. The auditorium was indeed full when he arrived. 6th through 8th graders filled the seats, their faces displaying the usual mix of boredom, curiosity, and premature cynicism. William had learned to read a room quickly, noting the social divisions visible even in seating arrangements, identifying the power brokers and the isolated. Principal Mercer introduced him with the standard biography William had provided. Communications degree, specialist in social dynamics, advocate for inclusive school environments. What the bio didn't mention was how William had mortgaged his future to build this career, maxing out credit cards to travel to unpaid speaking engagements in the early days, sleeping in his car when schools couldn't afford to put him up. "Good morning, Lincoln Middle School," William began, his voice carrying confidently to the back row. "I'm here today to talk about something we don't discuss enough, the way we treat each other and the lasting impact it has." He started as he always did, with humor and self-deprecation, acknowledging his size before any student could use it against him. "As you can see, I'm a big guy, always have been. In middle school, I was the kid who broke the cafeteria chair, twice." The ripple of laughter was gentle, curious rather than cruel. Then he shifted, bringing them into the reality of his childhood. He described the daily humiliations, the gym class torments, the cafeteria isolation, the bus rides where no one would share a seat. He didn't name his tormentors, but painted them in recognizable strokes, allowing students to see reflections of themselves or their peers. "Here's what I want you to understand," William said, moving away from the podium to stand at the edge of the stage. "When you target someone for being different, Whether it's their weight, their clothes, their accent, whatever, you're not just hurting them in that moment. You're shaping how they'll see themselves for years to come. He paused, scanning the silent audience. By 8th grade, I believed I was worthless. Not because there was anything wrong with me, but because I'd heard it so consistently that I accepted it as truth. In the 3rd row, a girl with glasses wiped her eyes. 2 rows behind her, a boy in a Letterman jacket stared at his hands. Now I want to talk to those of you who are hurting others, William continued, his voice gentler. I've spent years trying to understand why kids bully. What I've learned is that people hurt people. Many of you are carrying your own pain, your own fears. Maybe you're afraid of being targeted, so you target someone else first. Maybe you're dealing with stuff at home that makes you angry, and that anger has to go somewhere. A door at the back of the auditorium opened, and a teacher led in a student who had clearly been crying. They took seats in the last row. William nodded slightly in acknowledgement before continuing. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to tell you that there's another way. That the person you are at 12 or 13 or 14 doesn't have to be who you become. That you can choose, starting today, to be someone who builds others up instead of tearing them down. For the next 30 minutes, William guided them through exercises designed to build empathy, asking them to write anonymous notes about times they'd felt excluded, then reading some aloud to show how universal the experience was. He shared stories from other schools, where simple acts of inclusion had transformed students' lives. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the assembly, Principal Mercer stepped forward to dismiss the students, but William raised his hand. Before you go, I have one request, he said. Today at lunch, sit with someone you don't usually sit with. Just for today, see what happens. As the students filed out, many stopped to thank him or share quick snippets of their own experiences. The counselor, Patricia, approached with the student who had come in late. This is Emma, Patricia said. She wanted to meet you. Emma was small for her age, with dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Her eyes were red from crying. They made a website about me, she said without preamble. It has pictures they took in the locker room and comments about my body. William felt a surge of anger, quickly controlled. I'm so sorry that happened to you, Emma. That's not just mean. That's against the law. Patricia nodded. We're addressing it. The site's been taken down and the parents have been called in, but Emma wanted to ask you something. Emma looked up, her face determined despite her tears. How do I come back from this? How do I walk into school tomorrow knowing what they've all seen? William considered her question carefully. It was the hardest one, the one that kept him awake in hotel rooms across America. How do you rebuild yourself after public humiliation? With tremendous courage, he said finally. The kind you're showing right now by being here. It won't be easy and it won't happen overnight, but I promise you that this moment, as awful as it is, doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do next. They talked for 10 more minutes, William sharing practical strategies for facing her peers. When Emma left, looking slightly more hopeful, Patricia turned to him. We have these situations in every school now. Social media has made bullying both more public and more permanent. Kids can't even escape it at home anymore. William nodded grimly. It's why I'm developing a new program specifically addressing cyberbullying. The landscape has changed since I was in school. Later, after a lunch with the school's teachers where he provided strategies for intervention, William checked his email. Among the usual speaking inquiries was a message that made his heart race. An invitation to give a TED Talk at an independently organized TEDx event in Minneapolis. The subject line read, "Your message deserves a bigger platform." William had been working toward this moment for years, building his reputation school by school, developing a methodology based on research and his own hard-won experience. A TED Talk could amplify his reach exponentially, allowing him to impact far more students than he could through in-person appearances alone. That night, in his hotel room, William opened his laptop and began drafting his most important speech yet. The words flowed easily after hundreds of presentations, but the stakes felt higher. This wasn't just another school assembly. This was a chance to reach parents, educators, and students nationwide. As he wrote deep into the night, William thought about Emma and the thousands like her, fighting battles that were both universal and uniquely modern. He thought about his younger self, who could never have imagined standing on stages across America, turning his greatest pain into purpose. The title of his talk came to him around 2 a.m., The Weight of Words, How Childhood Bullying Shapes Adult Lives. William finally fell asleep as dawn broke over the Iowa cornfields, his mind still composing the speech that would catapult him from school auditoriums to a national stage. The journey that had begun in a classroom with Professor Jenkins was about to enter a new chapter. What William couldn't know was that his greatest challenge still lay ahead, one that would force him to confront the deepest wounds of his past and question everything he thought he knew about forgiveness. Capítulo 4. The Minneapolis Convention Center hummed with anticipation. In the green room, William adjusted his red power tie, the same one he'd worn for his first paid speaking engagement 3 years earlier. Now, as he prepared to take the TEDx stage, it served as a talisman, a reminder of how far he'd come. 5 minutes, Mr. Mitchell, the stage manager called, clipboard in hand. William nodded, taking a final glance at his note cards, though he hardly needed them anymore. After nearly 200 school presentations, his message had been honed to a sharp edge. Still, the stakes today felt immeasurably higher. His mother and father were in the audience, having driven 6 hours from Ohio to see their son on this prestigious stage. And somewhere in the darkened theater sat representatives from publishing houses and speaker bureaus, drawn by the buzz William had generated in educational circles. As he waited, William's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Michael Chen, his childhood friend from 5th grade, now a software engineer in Seattle. "Knock 'em dead, buddy," streaming it live. "So proud of you." William smiled, warmth spreading through his chest. Michael had remained a constant through the years, one of the few who had seen William at his lowest and believed in him regardless. Their friendship had survived geographic distance and the inevitable drift of adult lives, sustained by a bond forged in childhood adversity. The stage manager reappeared. "We're ready for you, Mr. Mitchell." William walked onto the stage to polite applause, the spotlight momentarily blinding him. As his eyes adjusted, he made out the sea of faces, hundreds of educators, parents, and activists who had come to hear talks on the future of learning. His pulse quickened, but he had learned to channel nervousness into energy rather than panic. "I was 10 years old," he began, his voice steady. "The first time someone called me whale, I am." For the next 18 minutes, William delivered the talk he had rehearsed countless times in hotel rooms and rental cars. He traced the arc of his experience from bullied child to advocate, weaving in research on the long-term psychological impacts of childhood bullying. He shared statistics on weight-based discrimination, cyberbullying, and the correlation between childhood trauma and adult outcomes. But statistics alone didn't move audiences. William knew his power lay in storytelling, in making the abstract painfully concrete. He described the moment in 8th grade when his weight was announced to the entire gym class. He recounted the prom night spent serving punch instead of dancing. He spoke of the years spent making himself smaller emotionally, even as his physical body remained large. Then he pivoted to the transformation, the moment in Professor Jenkins' class when he first claimed his story publicly. "What I discovered that day," William said, leaning slightly forward, "was that our deepest wounds can become our greatest gifts to others. The very experiences that I thought had broken me beyond repair turned out to be the foundation for my life's work." As he neared his conclusion, William paused, scanning the audience. His gaze fell on an older man in the 3rd row, his face partially obscured by the stage lighting. Something about the set of his shoulders seemed familiar. "Today, I speak at schools across America, helping students understand the lasting impact of their words and actions. But my message isn't just for kids. It's for all of us who have the power to shape environments where difference is celebrated rather than punished. The audience rose in a standing ovation as William thanked them. Backstage, he was met by the event organizer, a woman with a sleek bob and the frenetic energy of someone managing too many details. "That was phenomenal," she said, pumping his hand. "The publishers are already asking for your contact information. I think you've started something big here today." William thanked her, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't shake the nagging feeling about the man in the third row. After changing into more comfortable clothes in the green room, he made his way to the main hall where a reception was underway. His parents found him first, his mother's eyes shining with tears. "Oh, Willie," she said, using his childhood name as she hugged him. "I always knew you had something special to say." His father, less demonstrative but equally proud, clasped his shoulder. "You did good, son. Real good." As William mingled with attendees, signing programs and exchanging contact information with educators interested in bringing him to their districts, he kept scanning the crowd for the vaguely familiar face. He had almost given up when a voice behind him caused him to freeze. "You always were good with words, Mitchell." William turned slowly. Standing before him, older and grayer but unmistakable, was Tommy Watson, his primary tormentor from elementary school through high school. Time seemed to stop as William stared at the face that had populated his nightmares well into adulthood. Tommy was thinner than William remembered, with creases around his eyes and a receding hairline. He wore a conference badge identifying him as a middle school principal from Rochester. "Tommy!" William managed, his voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside him. "It's Thomas now," the man said, shifting uncomfortably. "Thomas Watson, Lakeside Middle School." He extended his hand tentatively. William hesitated only briefly before shaking it, decades of conditioning in politeness overriding his instinct to flee. 1,000 questions crowded his mind, but before he could voice any of them, Thomas spoke again. "Your talk?" he began, then faltered. "I've been sitting in the back of educational conferences for 3 years, hoping to run into you. When I saw your name on the program today, I knew it was finally time." "Time for what?" William asked, aware of his parents watching curiously from a few feet away. Thomas glanced around at the crowded reception. "Is there somewhere we could talk? Just for a few minutes?" Against his better judgment, William nodded. They found a quiet corner near the exhibition hall, 2 middle-aged men sitting awkwardly on a bench, meant for tired convention-goers. "I've rehearsed this speech 100 times, Thomas said, staring at his hands. "Now I can't remember a word of it." He took a deep breath. "I want to apologize, William. What I did to you, what I led others in doing, was cruel and inexcusable. I've carried the shame of it for 30 years. William remained silent, processing the surreal moment. This was the apology he had fantasized about countless times. Yet now that it was happening, he felt strangely detached. "I became an educator because of you," Thomas continued. "Or rather, because of what I did to you. In college, I had a professor who made us examine our complicity in systemic injustice. It forced me to confront who I'd been as a kid, the harm I'd caused. I decided then that I needed to spend my life making amends, creating schools where what happened to you wouldn't happen to other kids." William found his voice. "And have you created those schools?" Thomas looked up, his expression a mixture of hope and resignation. "I've tried. We have comprehensive anti-bullying programs, restorative justice practices, a whole framework for teaching empathy and inclusion." He paused. "But it's never enough. Kids still find ways to hurt each other. The methods change, but the pain is the same." For the first time, William saw Thomas not as his former tormentor, but as a fellow soldier in the same war, a war against the casual cruelty that children inflict on one another. The realization was both unsettling and strangely comforting. "Why did you do it?" William asked, the question that had haunted him for decades finally finding voice. "Why me?" Thomas didn't flinch from the question. "Because I was terrified of becoming you," he said quietly. "My father was a big man who died of a heart attack when I was 9. My mother was constantly putting me on diets, terrified I'd follow in his footsteps. When I saw you accepting the cookies your mum baked, comfortable in your larger body, it triggered something ugly in me. I bullied you for having what I couldn't allow myself to have: self-acceptance." The explanation wasn't what William had expected. In his imagination, Tommy had tormented him out of pure malice or thoughtless cruelty. The idea that his bullying had been driven by fear and envy added a complexity William wasn't prepared for. "I don't expect forgiveness," Thomas added. "I just wanted you to know that your work matters. You're changing lives, including mine." William sat with the silence that followed, feeling the weight of their shared history and the strange symmetry of their parallel careers. Both of them shaped by the same events, now working from opposite ends to solve the same problem. "I don't know if I can forgive you today," William said finally, "but I'm willing to start a conversation." They exchanged contact information before rejoining the reception. William's parents, sensing something momentous had occurred, didn't press for details. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and networking. Later, in his hotel room, William sat at the desk and opened his laptop. The email from the publisher was already waiting, expressing interest in a book proposal. Another message confirmed that his TEDx talk would be uploaded within weeks, potentially reaching millions. But it was a third email that captured his full attention, from a high school in Fairbanks, Alaska, asking if he could come speak to their students who were dealing with an epidemic of cyberbullying. The school had little budget, but offered to cover his travel expenses if he could make it work. William began to type his response, accepting the invitation. As his career expanded to include publishing deals and speaking bureau representation, he was determined not to lose sight of his core mission, reaching the students who needed his message most. His phone chimed with a text from Thomas Watson. "Your talk is still resonating with me. Would you be open to collaborating on a curriculum someday?" William stared at the message, marveling at life's unexpected turns. The boy who had once made his life miserable was now offering a professional partnership. It was too soon for that, but the door had been opened to something William had never anticipated: reconciliation. Outside his window, Minneapolis glittered in the darkness. Tomorrow, he would fly to Des Moines for another school presentation, then on to Lincoln, Nebraska, and Kansas City after that. His calendar was filled with commitments taking him to schools across America, from affluent suburbs to struggling rural communities. At 33, William Mitchell had transformed the pain of his past into a mission that touched thousands of lives. He hadn't forgotten the scared, lonely boy he once was. The child's experiences remained the foundation of his work. But he was no longer defined by those experiences alone. As he prepared for bed, William caught his reflection in the mirror. He saw a man of substance, not just physically, but in all the ways that truly mattered. A man who had learned that taking up space in the world wasn't something to apologize for, but a right that belonged to everyone, regardless of size or difference. Tomorrow, he would share that message with another auditorium full of students. Some would hear him, some wouldn't. But for those who did, the Emmas and Williams sitting in crowded school auditoriums across America, his words might be the lifeline they needed, proof that their stories too could ultimately become their greatest strength.